everyone. Welcome to the very first podcast, our home church podcast. And we're excited about these podcasts every week. For the next season of time, we're going to have a different podcast that just tells you something that's happening in our church that's amazing, but maybe something that you don't know about, might be something that you want to be involved in. And today we're really excited. We have Pastor Brian Thomson with us today in this podcast. And he's the International Director of Home of Hope, as well as he oversees many of our home church locations internationally. And we are going to have a great time just talking about missions and all that God is doing through home church, but through Pastor Brian in missions. And so we're going to start right at the beginning, because I literally have known Pastor Brian from the moment of birth. The moment that I took my first breath. No,
we believe in dinosaurs.
It would be back in those days. And Pastor Brian has been one of the greatest blessings in my life. From someone that I've just looked up to right through my childhood, through my teens, Bible college teacher, someone who mentored me in the ministry. And I
still feel young.
And still someone that Beck and I really look up to, Pastor Brian and Connie. And so we're excited to talk about life and just the journey of ministry life and where it's brought us to today. And so, Pastor Brian, first of all, just welcome to our first podcast.
New chapter.
And we're excited about this. And Pastor Brian, just tell us right from the beginning, how did you find Jesus?
You know, I went to church, especially on communion Sundays, growing up as a child. And then my sister, who I say is probably the greatest sinner that I knew at the time, kind of ran away from home, was in the bar and drinking and smoking and living the wild life. And I was this calm little farm boy. And one day she came home and she had totally changed. Probably one of the greatest conversions that I've ever seen, even to this day. She just went from darkness to light, and the change in her life was just amazing. And she said, Brian, you need Jesus in your life. And she took me to a church that was a born-again church, and it just started me on a whole new course of meeting God. You know, I always believed in God, you know, growing up on a farm, and, you know, how little seed can come up out of the ground. You know, that was not evolution. I always believed in God. But one thing Diane said to me is, Brian, Jesus is not Santa Claus. You hear about Santa Claus, and then, 8 years old, you find out he's a fake. But Jesus really is the Son of God, and you need Jesus in your life. And my sister's testimony changed my life. And I got on my knees by my bed once, and I just said, God, whatever you did for Diane, I want to have it. That was my sinner's prayer.
Was changed.
I was totally changed.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how did you get into ministry? What did that look like for you?
When I went to Diane had ended up in Vancouver. She came home at Easter and took me to this church. And there was a girl in that church that rode the school bus with me. I was in grade 11. And she goes, hey. And I kind of scorched her. I said, you know, you've been riding this bus with me for years and you never told me about Jesus. You know, amazing. I made the little girl cry, which I apologized later. And she goes, you have to come back to church. And her mom and dad and family told me to come back the next Sunday. I was so shy. I didn't know if I was going to go or not. But they told me that they wanted to take me for lunch. And that little girl was waiting on the church steps for me to come.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was that little 12-year-old girl. And so we went into church, and in fact, when I was sitting in there, I heard the word tithing for the first time, and I talked to her brother, was like 8, and I go, what's a tithe? And that little 8-year-old taught me about tithing. Amazing. So there wasn't too many young people in that church, so this family discipled me and kind of got me going on the right pathway. Yeah. Then they made an announcement about youth group. I said, what's a youth group? And so that one of those Fridays, I went to youth group, and a guy named Les Gill was there leading youth, and he was going back and forth teaching in the Bible college in Calgary, and he was the guy that really followed me up. And he said, Brian, you should go to Bible college. And then he took off on a mission trip, and that really mystified me. He quit an electrician's job that had a good wage to go be a missionary that made nothing. I said, why would you do that? It just kind of haunted me. And he sent me old-fashioned blue paper airmail from Taiwan, and he discipled me, answered my questions, and I finished my high school halfway through grade 12, and I started going to Calgary Bible College, and that's how I got involved.
And then you were serving in the church, and this was in Olds.
Yeah. So I would do the exact same thing he did. We went to Bible college, and every Friday I came home and led the youth group and started leading songs on Sunday, learned the guitar, and just started getting involved right away.
Right. And then at some point, my father, Pastor Mel Mullen, who's the founder of our church, asked you to come and move to Red Deer.
We were having special events with a guy named Bob Hoover. We had 3 weeks of church every night for 3 weeks. And we saw God do healings and people getting full of the Holy Spirit. And it was just amazing. And Bob Hoover, when it was all done, he said, you need to come to Red Deer. I'm speaking in Red Deer tonight. And so he, invited me to come up. And that's when I first met Pastor Mel. And in fact, he was gone. I met Pastor Glenn first, but then I had to come back and meet Pastor Mel. And then we went for a walk at the Rotary Park. And he says, well, what are you guys doing with your life? And that was kind of our first connection.
First connection in ministry. And then you were a youth pastor here in Red Deer for how many years?
Well, we started being the youth pastor in Olds, and we were driving back and forth, and I got invited to speak in Red Deer at a youth event, and God's power just started really, there was like a whole season change there where God was doing something with young people. And so I was leading the youth in Olds and driving in on the weekends to help with Red Deer. And then Pastor Mel said, Brian, we need you in Red Deer. And
then you moved to Red Deer.
We moved to Red Deer.
And then, for the next
16 years, probably
16 years, and you served as associate pastor in our church. And then for, I think it was about 16 years, you were itinerant.
Yeah.
Literally across Canada.
Yeah.
I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but like how many denominations?
I stopped counting at 60.
Right. So 60 different denominations across Canada.
Yeah, I didn't know there was that many, but
that
you traveling.
Ministered in and preached God's word and gave the gospel, helped those churches, helped those pastors.
Yeah. Evangelism crusades, healing crusades.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And then at one point, everything changed really by one word from God.
Yeah. We had conferences here for pastors for many, many years.
Missions.
30 years.
But did you ever, just before we get to that,
okay,
was missions, and we're going to talk about Africa, Rwanda, some of these places, were they even on your radar?
No, absolutely not. We had done Troy Walker. We had a rock and roll band that all got saved together, and we started to go on the streets and had a flat deck and parked it all over town. A little different, call them block parties today with us. And we had a guest speaker from England, and he came over and heard us, what we were doing here. And also we were sharing Christ in the bars. And he said, you need to come to England to share in the bars. So we took that band that we had led to the Lord, and we went to England. That was our first mission trip. And we were, it was kind of crazy, but we would follow the worst things that you'd ever see in a bar. And we had to, we were waiting outside until the other people got off stage, and we ran right in there and started doing our Carmen skits and preaching the gospel. And then the bar would close down. I forget what it was. I think it closed down like at midnight. And all the people came outside, and we just kept doing our dramas outside. Nobody wanted to go home. We had, just whatever. It felt like 200 people outside in the street at midnight. And it was kind of dangerous, but there was a policeman that came by, and he said, I want to help you and watch over you. And he stood right beside me as we were sharing Christ and singing songs in the streets in England.
Amazing.
Yeah.
But you never thought that missions would, you went on mission trips.
Yeah.
But you never thought that.
Didn't see it coming at all.
This would end up being kind of central to what God is doing in this season of life. Mm-hmm. It's amazing how, there's these different seasons that you think that you'll be serving Jesus in this capacity kind of forever.
And you get real comfortable.
Yeah.
As soon as you kind of get comfortable, be careful.
Be careful, because God's going to speak, and he's going to move.
Yeah, Deuteronomy 32 talks about the mother eagle casting the baby eaglets out of the nest. Wow. And it was quite a change I didn't see coming at all.
Amazing. Yeah. And so what happened on that day where you really got this word from God and your kind of steps of obedience after this day, especially regarding Africa, Rwanda?
We had a Bible college graduation, and I had organized that, and I was out of the service, taking off my grad gown And our speaker at the time, Cindy Jacobs, she goes, "Where's Brian Thomson? He was just on the stage. Where'd he go? Don't go to the bathroom when you have a prophet in town, you know." So I came running in, and we had known Cindy really close. We pick her up at the airport, my wife and I, and she said, "Brian, when you're on stage, I just saw a map of Africa. Africa, 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 and churches. I see churches all over Africa." Then she pointed her finger and says, "You need to go to Rwanda." And I didn't even know what a Rwanda was. And someone sitting, one of the pastors in the crowd, came right up to me and said, "I was just in Rwanda. I'm going to set you up in the same church," which it was the biggest church in Rwanda. And so I went home that night and found out what Rwanda was and had no idea it had a genocide where 1 million people, you know, they killed each other, two or three different tribes killing each other. And so we planned a trip and listened to the prophecy, and, you know,
that's amazing. And then you went.
Yep.
And what was that first trip like?
Well, as we were researching Rwanda, it was at that time the #1 orphan need in the world. I thought, oh, okay. So when we went over and were speaking at a church, there was a second church I was speaking at too, and I said to the pastor, "Do you know any orphans?" And he just laughed at me like, "Of course we know about orphans everywhere, from the genocide and the HIV AIDS epidemic." And I said, "Let's go for a walk." And we walked down this muddy little pathway into these mud huts, and this one the size of a Canadian bathroom, just a small little mud hut. And these 4 children, it's kind of dusk, and they had no lights, so my eyes get adjusted to this dark little house, and there was this little couch where 4 siblings were sitting there with this hopeless look in their eye. Their dad had just died of AIDS. Their mother was in the hospital, ready to die any day with AIDS. These 4 little kids. And Rwanda at the time was the #1 in the world for children raising children. Wow. So I think the oldest was 12 years old, and she was helping with her younger brothers and sisters, and it just kind of gripped me. You know, you watch different shows on TV that have children with the flies in the faces and stuff, and I just flipped by those all the time. They never, ever spoke to me. But when you had children right in front of you,
yeah, that's right.
You know, still makes me cry today. Yeah. It's a different feeling. And I said, "Let's get these kids some food. Let's get them some clothes." And it just really shook me out. I didn't cry at that time. I just we got to help these kids. And I said, "Pastor, how many more desperate ones like that?" And he said 20. And we went and met these 20 kids, took pictures. And I didn't know what else then. I was going to come home and say, "Connie, we got to help these 20 kids." But when I got home, people just started asking me, what happened in your life? And they said, "I want to sponsor." Right. We even had those 4 kids on our fridge, and we had people visit us, and they say, "Hey, what's on your fridge?" Right. And they'd go and look at it, and they said, "I want one." They just grabbed one, took it off. So I had to hide the one. I wanted to keep one of those 4. But we had people God was blowing on it and leading, and something we never knew what's happening, really.
Well, Beck and I have been part of that pretty much since the beginning. I'm sure we were one of those first sponsors. Mm-hmm. And a real privilege and joy for us.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'll talk about the Home of Hope in Kenya in a little bit as well. We sponsored one in Rwanda and one in Kenya. Mm-hmm. And what a joy.
Yeah.
In fact, Sandrine from Rwanda, we've been talking over FaceTime. She's a little older now.
Isn't that good? Yeah.
You know, and I got to meet her and her sister Dorcas when I was there, and, you know, take them and buy them clothing and shoes and things.
James 1:27 says, "Visit the orphan." Wonderful. It's one of the greatest things you can do. You can go preach the gospel in the nation, as Jesus said. Yeah. But James says, go visit the orphan and help the fathers.
And just being there myself, like I can just testify right with you there. You know, I went with my father-in-law, Virgil, and we would go in the day. And I remember the first day we were there, it was pouring rain, and we drove up the mountain to Jabana, you know, in this vehicle that barely could get up the mountain, and it was pouring rain and it was mud, and these kids were following us, yelling "Mzungu, Mzungu," right? And
white man.
And so we get to the top, and there's these kids, and they're just mud head to toe because of the rain, and they'd be chasing our vehicle. And then you have this moment like, am I gonna hug these kids or not? And of course you decide, yes, of course. Yeah. You reach out, and it was actually interesting for Virgil and I. We actually didn't cry at those moments, but it was actually the next day at breakfast.
Yeah.
Every breakfast, we would just sit there and tears would roll down our face because God was doing such amazing things. And it is amazing what's happened. Just briefly, just tell us how many kids today are being taken care of through sponsorship or through a food program.
We say we help kids in 7 different ways. And one of them is monthly sponsorship. And we really focus on kids that are absolutely desperate and helpless, like in Kenya where the babies are thrown away live in the garbage. No relative alive that cares for them, no name. And most of the kids, we just found one, it was just on Facebook today, another child. And our worker said, who wants to sponsor this child? You can start sponsoring and you can name the child, just even today. And so we've been doing that for a number of years now. And so sponsoring kids, sometimes they're sponsoring just temporarily until we can help the mother or guardian through a microloan be able to get some food and pay their own way. But we have feeding projects between 4,000 and 5,000 kids that we feed one hot meal every week just to help keep them alive. And shoes, animal projects. I think we have 6 schools now in Africa. And 7 different ways of helping children. But
it's amazing that started with 4.
4.
That was your own.
It was never a goal. Let's start an organization and help 10,000 kids. It was never.
And I remember in those first days. I mean, I don't even remember how old I was at the time, but as this was developing, I remember Pastor Mel saying, we don't have orphanages. We believe in building the church. And churches that will have orphanage. And so that's where home church really began to expand internationally. Through these different things that would happen. And so, like, just to give a little picture, when I was there, I said, "What are we doing today?" And they said, "Oh, we're going to start a church." And so we drove about 2.5 hours on this bumpy road to the middle of nowhere that I had never been, by this lake, and in someone's house that they had, that just would hold maybe 20 people. They started calling people in, and they said, "Pastor, preach." And I preached John 3:16, and 18 people gave their lives to the Lord. And then soon after that, we bought a little piece of property there right by the lake, and now there's a church.
We have 20 home churches in Rwanda now.
It's wonderful. And so each one of those churches would have feeding programs.
Not all of them have feeding projects, but they all are doing something do what they can do, and God will do what we can't do. And all of them are trying to raise a little money that they can to help feed, even without any sponsorship. Because there's desperate kids, and especially the rural areas. It's just kids with no shoes and nothing, just living in a mud hut somewhere.
It's amazing to be a part of that. It's an amazing also just to know the power of the church. Because it's the church here that's affecting there, but it's also the church there that is affecting there. And
all of our kids with Home of Hope all attend a home church.
Yeah.
That's just the model that we have.
And how many people are coming to Christ every month, even in
my sister Florence does this fantastic. As of right now, we're averaging 1,967 people coming to Christ average, and we're one church in 110 locations in 14 countries. Thank you, Florence.
Wow. And so anyone listening to this, if you're part of home church, you just honestly thank God for what's going on. I know in our church this year, 29% of the finances that flow through our church go to missions. And that's missions in Africa. That's also missions in Istanbul, Turkey. And
that's very high. I don't know any church that's that high.
And like literally, I think 15 different countries around the world that the gospel is going out of. And that is the Great Commission. Like, this is what we should be doing and what we are doing. But this is what a good picture of what it looks like. And before we continue on, I just want to say, Pastor Brian, knowing you my whole life and watching you walk with integrity and serving God so well, like it makes me so excited. But it also just it makes me excited to be able to say to people over this podcast today, this is a great ministry to be a part of. This is a great church to be a part of. But this is a great, if you want to sow a seed or do something, we'll tell you at the end how to do that. But, to know that, Pastor Brian and Connie have been in the ministry for over 40 years as a part of home church, and in all these different roles, but now it's led to this incredible season of time over this last, how many years has it been since you've been starting to go to Africa and some of these countries?
Well, 12 and a half years ago was the start of Home of Hope.
Wow.
But
so in 12 and a half years,
real focused, building our one church in many locations in Home of Hope. That's been the number one focus of my life the last 12 and a half years.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the Dream Center in Kenya and some of the things that have happened in the Dream Center, and maybe even kind of where the Dream Center is and what happens at the Dream Center.
I was in Africa 25 years ago with a guy named Elroy Pancratz. That said, I preached in his church in Oliver, and we saw some miracles. He said, Brian, let's go to Africa together. And I go, Africa? Who wants to go to Africa? So he kept on me, and we went to Africa. And my interpreter at that time was Daniel Bushebi. Met him, and then when I went back 12 and a half years ago, I connected with him again. He happened to be living in Nairobi. So I had a 7-hour layover in Nairobi before going to Kenya, and we had a little visit. And he was starting a church in a slum. There's 26 slums in Nairobi. It's hard to believe. And so I went and visited the slum and built a friendship. And we started a home church in Nairobi. And I asked Daniel one time, I said, Daniel, what is God telling you to do about your future? And he said, Brian, last night on the news, there was a whole report of babies being thrown away in the little river. It's not really a river, just this little tiny stream going through a 30-acre dump in the middle of Nairobi. Just the worst garbage you've ever seen. And they had discovered babies. A dog had gotten to one and eaten half the face, and they rushed it to the hospital. Yeah, it was just the saddest story. He goes, Brian, my wife and I feel called to rescue babies. And that was in December. Then we had a prayer meeting. We have a one-day prayer meeting every January. And the number one thing that he asked for, prayer for Kenya, was this starting to rescue babies. Wow. And we could feel the presence of God in that prayer meeting. It just was amazing. I remember it so key today. And Don Hiroki came right up to me after and said, I want to give the first $1 to help rescue babies. And we've been rescuing, I think we've rescued 300 babies. It's over 300 something babies. And what we ended up doing was paying people to go walk through the dump with a flashlight at like 4 a.m. to look for babies before the birds and the dogs got to them. And we got there too late all the time. So we've made these 3 great big billboard signs. Please don't throw away your baby. Wow. And we get 10 to 15 calls every day of girls that are raped. Our number one call right now is like 14-year-old girls that have been raped in these slums and are pregnant, and they themselves are malnourished and poor, and they just have no hope of ever raising a baby, and they call. So we're leading them to Jesus and trying to get them to keep their child. But other than that, there's still babies left on the dirt and left even below the signs, left in the river, thrown in a garbage bag. It's just incredible. So Daniel Bushebi was the one that was his vision. We blessed it and helped train towards his vision, and we've been working together. And he's our
there's an actual building there.
There's a building
Dream
that
Center.
Yep. Home church took a few offerings over a few years of family camp, and it's a wonderful building, 3-story that can hold at least 50 babies at one time. Where our goal is to try to raise rescue 50 babies a year and then get them placed into foster families or little family units, not orphanages, family units. And it's a big project.
Beck and I have our 4th child. We have 4 kids, and our 4th child, his name is Matthew.
Yeah.
And so Matthew was born. And around that exact same time that he was born was when we had the opportunity to sponsor a child at the Dream Center. Yeah. And that child was already named, and it was Matthew.
Okay.
And so we've got to watch that child go through as a baby, being malnourished, look like he maybe wouldn't make it, to being a healthy, child that is now actually been adopted and
is alive because you helped.
Is alive because we help, but alive because also the people here, and because of you, and because of the people there that have helped, and even some of the people that have been helped and helping are actually some of the moms of these children.
Yeah.
That some of them you've helped with microloans through this ministry. And
one of the best things we have is a food cart. And this food cart, it costs 500 Canadian. It's a cart with an umbrella with a little hibachi barbecue that can cook eggs and sausage and French fries. And we can give that to somebody immediately, and they can go outside and start cooking and selling right on the street, and go from being involved with prostitution for 50 cents to making $15 and $20 a day. And then they have that cart for 6 months. It's our property. We lend that to them, and we teach them how to save and some business training. And they can, in 6 months, start making enough money to become self-supporting, get out of the slum, and go into a little condo or a little apartment block for like $50 a month. Yeah, it's just a great, self-sustaining is such a great word. And then microloans. We have hundreds and hundreds of ladies in Kenya and especially Congo on microloan programs. That is also one of the greatest ways you can ever give to missions.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I want to say something because, our church in Red Deer here, I just thank God for it so much. We have so many different nations that are part of our church. We call them international church family.
We used to be white like 15 years ago.
Like when I was growing up, Red Deer was a white city. Yeah. And I'm so thankful. Some of our best friends, Rebecca and I, are just family from around the world. And it's amazing to see an international church in Red Deer that's reaching internationally. I mean, we're talking about Africa primarily today, but also these other places around the world that we get to be a part of. It's just awesome to see God do amazing things. If someone wanted to be involved, they're hearing this today, and we're only really scratching the surface. Like literally, I know, Pastor Brian, you could talk for
all day.
hours and go story after story after story. Yeah. But how are some of the different ways that people could be involved if they wanted to be involved?
Our website is www.homeofhope.ca. And right on there, you can see some sponsored children right away. You just click and see a number of children. You can choose if you want a boy or a girl, or young or old, or Kenya or Rwanda, and different things like that. Then we have different projects. Another one is animal projects are really good, especially in Congo and Rwanda, where 10 ladies can work together in a co-op and get 10 goats or 10 pigs, and they work together in a co-op and help make their own money and be accountable to each other. That's a wonderful thing. Probably one of the focal points this year, our goal is to help 5,000 children this year alone in these 7 different ways, and we're well on pace. We'll probably pass it easily, is the refugee camps of northern Congo. And I was just there in May because Dan Peters has been there many times. Brian, you got to go. We got to help. These kids are just starving, like 10,000 kids. And there's no NGO, no other church helping just these. It's just like a 100-acre field filled with the grossest straw little huts you've ever seen, just jammed together. And when it rains, these people are sleeping in the mud. So we're buying tarps to go over the homes. We're giving shoes. I would guess, this is my guess from being there, 95% of these kids don't have shoes, never had a pair of shoes in their life. And you can buy a pair of sandals, like quality sandals or used running shoes for like $3. Yeah. And I'd say 50% of the kids that I saw are malnourished. There are blotches in their head, hair is falling out, and their cheeks are swelling up. So we have we have a wonderful home church, about at least 700 people jammed in 3 services on Sunday. And we're starting a church this August in another refugee camp called Buganga. And some of our people from our church are going over to help build the trusses in the roof and starting a feeding project. And it's just fun to be a part.
Amazing. So. And I want to just encourage you, if you're part of home church, you just come and talk to you at any time about any of these things, and ask any question you want to ask, and be a part. And
Monday to Friday, our office is open, 403-343-6570, extension 6, and we have wonderful girls in our Home of Hope office that would love to answer questions. We love questions.
It's great.
And also emails.
Wonderful. Pastor Brian, thank you so much for all that you do to reach people for Christ, both here in Canada and all that you've done. I mean, talking about all those different denominations that you've spoken into, and helping, being just such a core leader in our church right here in Red Deer, but also our locations in Alberta here. And then just what God's done through you is just phenomenal. And we're just so excited to be a part of it, honestly. Pastor Brian, just kind of as we conclude, I think the heartbeat, as I've known you literally since I was born, as we talked about earlier.
I didn't change your diapers.
Thank God. But, the one thing that just rings through as kind of a thread through it all, no matter whether it was in youth meetings, in kids meetings, in all these different denominations, in working in our church as youth pastor and associate pastor, and doing itinerant work, and then now around the world. The one thing that just kind of rings through to me as a strand or a string that kind of ties it all together is just your passion to see people come to Christ.
Yeah.
Would you just, for a second, talk about that passion, and then just also maybe encourage everyone that's listening to this of what they could do to open a door for someone to come to Jesus?
Yeah. Well, my favorite verse in the Bible is Acts 20:24 in the New Living Translation. It says, "My life is worth nothing unless I use my life for doing what we're called to do, telling people about the glorious message of Jesus." And you can go make money, you can do a lot of things, and like marriage is great, family is great, those things. But as far as what I do with my time, there's nothing greater than telling people about Jesus. And to be able to invite someone to church and see them put their hand up or lead them to Jesus over coffee, you go to bed at night thinking, someone's in heaven today. Yeah. What's greater than, going to a movie? Going to a movie is okay, but, wow, what a great movie. But you can still just go to bed and be empty, So I like trying to tell people about Jesus in every different way. One way we teach in the Bible college, another whole thing is Bible college. My wife and I founded the Bible college 35 years ago, I think. And I still teach 2 hours a week, and one is on evangelism, is whatever you like doing, try to invite someone that doesn't know the Lord. I love riding motorcycles. My wife bought me a motorcycle and got a 1600 Yamaha, and I started this little club. And one of the women in our church said, I have a boyfriend that trying to get to church. He won't come to church, and it's a matter of conversation. He rides a motorcycle. So we rode on a motorcycle and took him to lunch and supper in Sylvan Lake. And then he came to our football big party. And now he's saved, and he's leading a mission trip next week. It's just fun. And I love playing tennis. You try to just, invite people to play tennis, and you become friends, and then you invite them to church, and they put their hand up to receive Jesus. It's just, it's never meant to be awkward. It's to be kind of the focal point of our life, and it's just, get your hair cut. You try to bring up Jesus in every conversation you can. Yeah. Not be weird, but just, the passion. If Jesus is the passion of your life, it's going to come out.
Yeah. I love the scripture. I know it's one of your favorite scriptures. Jesus said, go into all the world. Yeah. Preach the gospel.
The uttermost parts.
The uttermost parts. And it talks about from Jerusalem, Samaria, the ends of the earth. And I just think it's so important that
starts right here.
It starts right here.
Yeah.
And it goes there. And
city, your province, your country.
And we can do so much to see our city come to Christ. And at the same time, we don't have to be just thinking about our city. We can do something around the world. And some people have like their thought that, everything's got to be there, but that doesn't work either, because if it's just there, then what about here?
Yeah.
But we can see people come to Christ. Pastor Brian, thank you so much for being a part of this. I want to encourage everyone to go to homeofhope.ca, as well as you can also go to our church website, myhomechurch.ca. And I want to encourage you, if you would please, if you haven't already, subscribe to this podcast, but would you take a moment and also put it on Facebook or Instagram that you listen to this today? We're going to have many more interviews like this over the next season of time that are going to be really interesting, but also give you a window into what God's doing, because oftentimes we only get a small picture of all that God's doing, and what God is doing is amazing. all around the world. So thank you so much, Pastor Brian, for being here today to talk just a little bit, just give a window picture of all that's happened through Home Church, through Home of Hope, through what God's done through your life and through Pastor Connie's life. We're so thankful for you, and we just pray God's blessing on you.
Thank you so much.
And way into the future.
Team.
God has great things, and we're so excited for that today. So God bless you today. Have an awesome day, and thanks for listening.